Hi. So I always like to start with this slide because I find it pretty inspirational. Like, if that cat can ride bacon through space, then we can do anything. People usually laugh harder at that. Anyway, hi. So I'm Cap. I'm the VP of Design at BuzzFeed. But I've only been there 13 weeks, so we're actually not going to talk about BuzzFeed. And because I know basically nothing still. Actually, this has been very informational for me. So thanks. So actually we're going to talk about my last job a lot, Etsy. But before I talk about that, I figured I should back up a little bit because a lot of you are like, who the hell is this guy? And before I even get super into design, I wanted to make a confession, which they didn't ask me about before asking me to speak here, but they should probably know now. I'm not a designer. At least not, like, I'm not trained in design. I didn't go to school for design, and this is how I felt for a very long time. In fact, this kid wanted to be a doctor growing up. So actually, I dyed my hair back then. This is real. So. And my parents, you know, your parents like hear you want to be a doctor, and they're like, pumped, man. Like, that's like the best thing a parent could possibly hear. And so they bought me all these books and this awesome CD-ROM series. And I loved this CD-ROM series. I read the whole thing. I would print out every page on our dot matrix printer, and I would take it to work. I would take it to work, yeah. I would take it to school and show it to all my third grade friends, and it was going really well. And then one day my parents got a phone call because I was reaching certain parts of the human anatomy which were inappropriate, unbeknownst to me, for third graders. And I was told to stop bringing these things to school. So I stopped. And so as I grew up, sorry. As I grew up, similarly, this is the Photoshop version. So similarly, as I grew up, I actually really held on to that. It wasn't something that was very fleeting for me. But on the side of that, I was actually writing a whole lot. WordPerfect, the blue screen. Anybody here watch Doogie Howser as a kid? Yes. I blogged. I was blogging before blogging. I was writing those little entries just like Doogie Howser, combining my two loves of medicine and writing. I would write neighborhood papers and distribute them across the neighborhood to people who had never met me. I would write plays for all the kids in the neighborhood. I'd get them all together and we'd act them out and make our parents pay for them, so I was also very entrepreneurial. And so then in high school, I do have high school photos, but I am not sharing them with you. In high school, it all changed. I was around, I think I was 16 or 17 years old, and I was in an English class, and I got my very first ever failing grade on a paper, and it, in a very masochistic way, it pissed me off so much that I was like, I'm going to get really good at this thing, and it turned out I really loved it. And so I worked my ass off. I wrote a whole bunch, and I had a really scary phone call with my parents about changing my major in college to English from pre-med. Again, this has been 17 years of build-up and one big disappointment. But actually, they were super cool about it, thank God. And so I became a creative writing major in college. This is me sending one of my stories off to a contest I never won. But I really enjoyed it. I was writing a whole lot, reading a whole lot. And after 4 years, I got out of school. I'd actually gotten into grad school in New York at the New School, but got the financial aid package and realized that it would be crazy to go that much into debt for a creative writing MFA. And so I did what every good English major does after college and got a job at Starbucks. And so I was working at this coffee shop. I was having these crises. I didn't know what to do with my life. And I'd always loved computers. Like I said, I was writing in WordPerfect back in the day. I'd had the internet for a very long time. I had actually been building websites in HTML. There was no CSS back then, so font tags, all that good stuff. If you wanted a different font, you had to cut it out in I guess some people are still doing this, but we shouldn't be doing that. But you had to cut it out in Photoshop and put it in as an image. And so I was moonlighting for friends, doing website design and building some stuff for them on the side. And I wound up doing some work for a couple of friends from college who wound up getting their startup funded. And they called me and they were like, hey, we need someone, we didn't get that much money, so we need someone pretty cheap. Do you want to move to San Francisco and work on a startup with us? And so I said yes, and I had to do one interview with their investor who I totally bullshitted. I didn't know anything about CSS, but I told him I did, and he believed me. Still good friends. And so then I packed all my stuff. So the phone call, like, you got the job, came on a Thursday. I packed all my stuff on Friday, and I flew on Saturday to Oakland, California. This is me with all of my stuff, 2 whole bags worth. I wish I could go back to a time where it was so easy to move. And I started working with these folks at a company called Game Layers on a product called PMOG. Nobody's ever heard of this. Has anybody here heard of PMOG? It'll be the greatest thing. Whoever ever raises their hand to that, I will like be best friends with forever. So PMOG was a Firefox extension, this is in 2007 or so, that you would install, and it turns your internet browsing into an MMO game. So you were like browsing the internet and gaining experience points and leveling up in just your internetness, basically. And you could leave traps on websites. So like then someone else with the extension installed would go to that website and their screen would shake and your face would pop up like, gotcha, you take their points. You could build quests where you would like tie URLs together, and like someone would start on a URL, and like you could annotate that URL, and they could click next, and they go to the next website, and you'd annotate that, and you could like be like, it's Shark Week. I found all these different shark articles, and you could string them together and deliver those to people. It was actually pretty cool. But in 2007, the number of people who A, used Firefox, B, knew what extensions were, and C, like played games and found our little game, I'm pretty sure we like completely saturated our market. Pretty quickly. We had about 30,000 users, and it wound up not going super far. Also, it turns out it's very difficult. We had to basically hold everybody's internet browsing history in a database, which is very big over time, it turns out. So anyway, so we didn't make it, and we folded. And I was like, oh, that was quick. My design career is over. That was great. All 9 months of it was fantastic. But luckily, I'd done a little work. I had a portfolio of one thing I'd done. It was great. And I made some friends in San Francisco, and I wound up freelancing a bit, and then got a full-time offer to work at Zoosk. Has anybody heard of Zoosk? We have terrible commercials on TV now. You've probably seen them. But it means they're still around, so that's great. So I was the 5th employee. I was the only designer, even as we scaled up to around 90 or 100 people. And I learned a hell of a lot more about design and product design at Zoosk. The founders were from Microsoft, and kind of whatever Microsoft, everybody laughs at them, but like they knew a lot about like what design should look like and what design process looked like. So I learned about A/B testing and user testing. You can see like my user flows, my very first user flows are like pasted on the wall. Someone was like, why don't you put these in order? These Photoshop files in order, which I did on the wall. And we did our first user testing where I put an ad on Craigslist to give people $20 iTunes gift cards to come use the like sign-up flow, which in retrospect was super dangerous. Like total strangers, no screening. It was like, oh, you want to come? Great, come in, stranger from San Francisco. But we're all live, so that's good. Learned a lot about how bad my flows were. And it started to work. I mean, like Zoosk, like I said, still around. Like we're making a lot of money. And yeah, so that was awesome. I worked there for a couple of years, and then wound up moving on to work at Formspring. Has anybody heard of Formspring? Maybe. We were hot on the internet for like 10 seconds. It was great. So Formspring, if you're not familiar, was a social Q&A website. The idea was that like you had a profile, people could ask you questions about yourself, and then you would answer them, and the answers would appear in your profile. So it was like, our hypothesis was like, people don't blog because they don't think what they have to say is important. And if someone actually asked you a question about you particularly, maybe you would write about it because now you know somebody thinks it's important. The bad part about Formspring was that the feature that made it so popular was that you could ask somebody questions anonymously, like totally anonymously, like no account. And that made us really popular, but also made us like not very nice, not a very nice place to be. There's a lot of like abuse, and I mean like a lot of sites are still dealing with this today. And it was hard to like balance. We kept trying to like, instead of turning it off, like instead of turning that feature off, we kept trying to find ways to work around it, like installing filtering systems and like all sorts of weirdness, where we should have probably just turned it off. And so when I started to like think about leaving Formspring, I was thinking a lot about like finally like what does it mean to me to be a designer? Like what is the kind of stuff I want to work on? What's important to me? What kind of ethical dilemmas do I not want to be involved in? Which I guess makes the next place pretty surprising. I worked at Amazon for like a year and a half. but don't judge me yet. So like the way I made that decision was I was thinking about what products I really thought were awesome. Kindle, like I think it was in its 3rd generation and was pretty badass. I think it was like peak Kindle. Like it's been okay since then, but like that one was the best. And it was my first Kindle, and I was reading a whole lot more, and I was like, someone really nailed it. Like this company really is nailing user experience. Amazon Prime, who here uses Amazon Prime? Everybody, we all need toilet paper in 2 days. But it's super smart and it's super useful, and a lot of people are using it. And also, like when I interviewed, they wouldn't tell me what I was going to work on. It was a secret, and it's still a secret. I still can't talk about it. And I was like, I have to know. That's a great way to get people to work for you. Just be like, I can't tell you what you're going to be working on. You have to start first. Like literally, like my first day, they wouldn't even tell me until like the end of the day. Like I like had my whole orientation. Like finally, they take me up through the elevator, and like the door's shut, and they're like, okay, so, and then we went ahead and did it. So this is my first time working with other designers, was at Amazon. And I got to work with some pretty smart people. I've been solo forever. And incidentally met like the best designer I've ever met, who's still my mentor today, this guy, this very smart person, despite the crazy goggles, Aaron Donsbach, who actually is very similar to me in that like he has a film major, he didn't go to school for design, and weird anecdotally, this is totally off topic, but he used to like hitchhike on freight trains during the summer, and he had like this crazy pamphlet, like this hobo pamphlet about how to like hop trains and where all the crossings were, and like he like had designed this like artifact for himself to like illegally hitchhike across the country. Anyway, so anyway, he's pretty funny. So he taught me actually a lot about stepping away from the problems and stepping away from my own ideas, reevaluating work we had done, and not to be afraid of like throwing things away. Like if we found out that something wasn't working, or if we like hit a snag, there was nothing wrong with like stepping away, like wiping the slate and starting over, which until then had been pretty difficult for me to deal with as a baby designer with a lot of ego. And so yeah, so that brings us all the way back to Etsy. And everyone here knows what Etsy is, right? You can Google it if you don't. I'm just kidding, I'll tell you. So Etsy was founded in Brooklyn in 2005. And ever since then, the community has been selling a variety of things, like handmade and craft manufactured products, vintage goods, and supplies for making more stuff. So it's a nice little, cycle. Etsy's over 1 million sellers in over 200 countries now, I think. And today there are over 28 million items available on the site to purchase. And the company's growing really fast too. Everybody's probably heard that they're going to IPO, that they filed for their IPO. But this is like the sales numbers for all the way through 2013. And I think in 2014 they announced it's 1.9 billion in sales. So they're doing okay. It's a big business. There's a lot going on. There are over 600 people that work at Etsy and like tons and tons of offices like all over the world. And out of those employees, when I left, there were around 28 product designers on the team working across the organization. About 5% of the total org was product design. And at Etsy and at BuzzFeed, like we share the same challenges that most other designers do, I think. Like, how do we explain what we do to our coworkers? Like, how do we gain their respect, like, and their trust? And we've all seen this, right? We've all seen this website. Everybody here is familiar with Clients from Hell. I think it's hard to see, but this person, the client's asking him why he can't find his app on the App Store, and the guy's like, well, you pay me, I built a mobile website, it's not on the App Store. You can't find it there. And then this poor soul is asking over and over the client for like, hey, can I get the original logo file from you? Can I get the original thing? And he's like, finally, he like realizes that the guy had done it in Paint, and it's a bitmap. It's the original. So we've all been there. We all feel this pain, like we've all seen this before. We're all designers here, right? This is a safe place. We're okay. It's okay to admit this stuff. Who here has ever thought this? But I'm the designer. We've all thought this. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Or this. This is one of my favorite ones. Actually, this is my personal favorite. The next one is like something I think a lot, which is just like everyone thinks they're a designer. I felt this way like every job I've ever had. And I spent a lot of time and energy during my career fighting for design, fighting for myself as a designer. And it's really hard when like an engineer or a product manager or your CEO or an editor or someone from biz dev or marketing like criticizes your design to not just be like, or Or you know that thing where like a bunch of people collaborate on feedback and they like pack it all together into this big email and they send it to you? Like when I get those, it's just like, holy shit. Hold on, this gets really good. This is one of those long burns. There she is. That is like exactly how I feel when I get those emails. It's really easy. It's really good. It's really easy to think that like just no one understands what we do, right? And hey, that's probably true. That's probably true every time you've thought it. And because design's special. That's why it's so hard to explain to people. That's why nobody gets it. Like that's why like people are constantly in our way. And like how awesome would our work be if it wasn't for our fucking coworkers, right? So actually, that's wrong. Obviously, hopefully, obviously. Design's not special. In fact, designers are not special, and I really hate to break it to you. This is the thing that really screwed me up for a while was I finally figured out that designers aren't even necessary. Like it's totally 100% possible for a company to be successful with 0 designers whatsoever. Now, hold on. This is also a long burn. This is one of those ones that takes way too long, but it's okay when it finishes. Hold on. There it is. So hear me out. I'll give you an example. Terrible, right? The worst design. You know how I know it's the worst? Every designer has tried to redesign this website. Everyone. There are hundreds and hundreds of projects on Behance and Dribbble that are like, Craigslist redesign, Craigslist reimagining. We've all tried. It's terrible. It could be a little airier. It could have more white space, more legible. Like, that'd be nice. Craigslist could explain what they do, maybe. That seems good. Maybe they could add more context around, like, geography and where you are in the world. And these aren't perfect, right? These are just, like, quick reimaginings with 0 data. But, like, they're way better than this, right? This piece of crap. But what if I told you that reportedly last year, like, Craigslist made, like, over, like, nearly $200 million? And only 20% of that or so goes to overhead for Craigslist. So that's pretty cool. I went from thinking this about Craigslist to like feeling like this. I was just like, how is that possible? Like, how is it possible that that's true? And so I backed up and I looked at it again and tried to be a little more open-minded. And I started to realize, actually, like, it's pretty good. Like, everything here is incredibly clear. The hierarchy is extremely clear. Like, the headers are bigger, and there are actually, you can't really see them here, but there are, like, gray backgrounds behind them to, like, set them off. The hierarchy is good. Helps you get to what you want really fastly. And the really interesting thing about Craigslist is like the page loads are really short because it's all text, basically. Like the page loads are like lightning fast. So even if you click something, the wrong thing, like it's trivial. Like you haven't spent, you can go back and it's completely trivial to reload the page. Like you're not reloading much of like stuff. It's just like, it's milliseconds, which makes human error like totally fine. So it's actually pretty incredible. And like, who here has used Craigslist to sell or buy stuff? It's okay. Yes, because it's awesome and it works. And it's really simple. And I've actually talked to a couple engineers that have worked there, and like they've never had a designer. And there's some company culture thing, they just never will. Like they don't care to, that's fine. But someone's designing this. Like someone is, like whether they know it or not. Like someone really cares about keeping it simple and clean and like fast loading. And they only have like 22 employees on their team page, so I'm assuming everybody's kind of a part of that, right? Like a part of like making sure that it stays this way. Which makes me think that like design should be for everybody, and it actually is for everyone. So most companies, like product development is made up of 3 groups: product management, product design, and engineering. And some companies keep them separate and siloed. Like, so at Amazon, it worked like this. Like a product manager would like write up a spec, they'd toss it over the wall to design would design it, they'd toss it over the wall to engineering, who would then send it back to either design or product management and go like, are you crazy? And then we'd start the vicious cycle again. So that's not great. Other companies do things like this, where product management and product design are pretty tight. It's great, like they should be. RDO is like this, from what I understand. And it's an important collaboration, but it's still not enough. So at Etsy and at BuzzFeed, we look at things more like this. Or actually, the real way we look at it is more like this. We treat everyone as a stakeholder and voice in the product and design process. And the reason for that is like, because at its core, like design is just problem solving. That's all it is. The best solutions are formed by having like diverse opinions and having different perspectives and values and concerns. And that's how we get like the full picture of the problem. That's how holistic solutions are discovered. And you'll notice like I didn't show any work. I wasn't showing the products. I was showing like the teams I worked with. Well, first of all, it's because it's my baby designer work and it's not very good. But the other reason is that actually like the team is what like made it all happen, right? I've never worked on a team that wasn't messy like that. And the products are so much better for it. Like it's our job as designers to embrace alternate viewpoints, like this designer is currently not doing. This was actually like a totally not staged photo. This is an actual designer and a PM actually giving him an idea at Etsy. It's true. Yeah, this is a bad example. But it's our job as designers to embrace like alternate viewpoints, to bring people closer together and to empathize with their perspective and their concerns. It's our job to maximize everyone's value and like to squeeze every last drop of creativity out of our coworkers, to create a solution that everyone on the team like has had a hand in and believes in and will defend. Now I know like that sounds awesome, right? It sounds really nice. It's so fluffy and great. But like, what does that look like practically? Well, the first thing is I think to treat design as more than just how it looks. There's a website, everybody, woofmaker.com. You can literally put any photo into this tool, and it will create this GIF for you. Put your competitors' websites in here. It's great. So at Etsy, we treated visual design as collaborative as well. We gave people the input and the tools in order to collaborate on visual design. And that seems crazy, right? Well, we're going to buckle up. Ian Malcolm, you dog. So at Etsy, for the last year or so that I was there, we embarked on this project. So Etsy had never really had like a codified style guide. We'd had some version of a style guide, but nothing like in code. So we embarked on this like journey to create an entire style guide in code. It was 2 designers working on it, and eventually we roped in some front-end devs towards the end. But 2 designers basically wrote this entire thing from scratch. And it includes everything you would need to basically lay out and visually design a page. So it includes like all the grid systems that we have, form fields, buttons, typography, colors, icons, images, like components. So like if you wanted like a listing card, you could like just call a listing card and it would just work and look the way it should. And this is pretty awesome for a bunch of reasons. First of all, it allows anyone to quickly and easily prototype their idea. It's super trivial to do that. It allows a whiteboard to quickly become real without a designer ever touching Sketch or Photoshop or whatever you're using. It puts problem solving ahead of the visual, which I really like. We spend so much time in these tools and we kind of like, it's easy to get lost and forget what we're actually doing. And because the design components are all in code, like engineers and product managers can super easily make visual suggestions and just try them out. This is all in GitHub, right? So like if anybody wanted to make a suggestion for how we might adjust and change our visual style, you just do a pull request and it gets reviewed and then maybe it gets like pulled in and now it's part of the website automatically, which is pretty great. And the reason we can do this and not get territorial is because like we built a lot of trust across the teams. We all know this is not going to end well, right? Really badly. Too trusting. Build trust, not that much trust. So most product development cycles look something like this, where there's planning, there's a design phase, you develop some stuff, and then you like ship it and you measure what happened, and then the last grade is kind of like you maybe have a postmortem or whatever to kind of sum up what happened. In the system, like design's like a finite part of the process, and it's sandwiched like kind of in between 2 things. I think like a preferable way of looking at it is something like this, where design is just like the process, where it doesn't ever stop. Like you're not stopping designing during development, you're not stopping even while you're measuring, you're just continuously like pushing the design forward. And this means including everyone all the time. So this is like, I walked into a random, this is so Etsy, I walked into a random Etsy conference room and this was just on the whiteboard. I don't know what the meeting was, but it's good advice. Particularly the third thing, which is don't get in the way of the good time. Like don't get in the way. That's really good advice. Don't do that. So including everyone all the time. So practically speaking, like what we did at Etsy and what we're doing at BuzzFeed now is we use Basecamp not for project management, but just for design documentation. And all of design always starts with just writing. So all the designers would have a kickoff meeting with their product manager and their engineers about what they're about to work on. They'd talk about what the problems they're trying to solve were, what are the goals of the project, what are the strengths of the current system that we're trying to replace if there are any, so we just don't want to lose those things. And then they would go back to their desk, they'd sit down and they'd write them down. Like the designer would write them down, start a thread, add their product manager, add their engineers, add the entire design team, and post like the problems and the strengths and the tenets of the product that they're working on. And the nice thing about this is like, how many times have we like done work? Like we have a little kickoff, we go back to our desks as designers and we do work for like 3 weeks or like even days. And then like we show it to like the product manager or the engineers and you suddenly realize you weren't talking about the same thing. You suddenly realize that like you've wasted a whole bunch of time because like you misunderstood. They're like, oh, well, I actually meant that like, I meant this and not this other thing that you thought. And that's a huge bummer. And so what's great about this is like you post this and you've written it in your own words. And then the product manager or the engineers can actually chime in here and be like, hey, like I actually meant this. I actually think we're missing this problem. Or maybe this isn't a goal we should be striving for. And you can have that conversation before you've done any work, so you haven't wasted any time. It's actually pretty magical. And after that, we wind up posting all in progress design work here. And again, it's going out to everybody on the team and all of the designers. And this is kind of where like discussion happens and where critique happens as well. I mean, we have regular in-person critiques, but this is just the place for like it just to be happening all the time. It's open, it's honest, it's real-time discussion. So like this is like the product manager, like there's a design above here, and she's like, this is great. Have you thought about this, this, and this? And the designer gets to respond and say, like, actually, yeah. Oh, and it turns out like we just talked in person, so actually we document in-person conversations here too. Like if we like sum up, we're like, oh, I talked to this person and we came up with like these 3 takeaways, boom, boom, boom. Like it's all documented in the Basecamp thread. And what's cool about this is it treats like, first of all, it treats design as like open, but it also like treats all concerns as legitimate and valuable because they're all here. I mean, it's hard, if someone says something to you, it's easy just to be like, yeah, fuck you, whatever, and then go back to your desk, right? And not actually ever respond or do anything about it. This kind of like forces the conversation to happen because it's in public, and it also winds up being very civil, like, because it is in public, so that's nice. It creates transparency, which prevents surprises. The only time I've ever seen us have problems at any company I've ever been in is because someone got surprised or someone surprised someone else. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. This encourages and enhances collaboration. It doesn't stop there either. So at Etsy, we bought a bunch of boards and we started posting work up here, and we didn't even use these. Like we didn't use them for any like practical design purpose, but it was more to just like keep opening it up, like just put it all over the place, like surround everybody with the work. And I remember when we first did this, we'd only done 2 boards, and I took this photo. I was at my desk, and one of the designers, we had just put the boards up, and I look up, and the designer across the room is like waving at me wildly, and she's doing this, like towards the boards, and I look over, and like there's like 2 engineers, a product manager, and a data analyst who are not on the team that work is for, talking about the work. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, they don't even know what that work is. Actually, we'd never explained it to anybody. But they're just sitting there talking about it, and that's awesome. This is what should be happening. So we also build trust at Etsy and at BuzzFeed by getting into the code. So at Etsy, all the designers were also front-end devs, so they were all responsible for building their own products in like live production code. At Etsy, all the designers, actually everybody, is able to deploy to production anytime. We were deploying around 30 or 40 times a day when I left. It's probably more now. But as a designer, you could deploy anytime to the live site. And so we were in the code with the engineers. And like when you start to get into the code with people, I mean, also with that style guide, you're passing it back and forth. You wind up having design discussions before something gets built the wrong way or built in a way that makes it hard to go back. You're in there with them, and it like really creates a lot more transparency and trust, and a lot more of that like nice messy like circle that we like. So all this transparent, actually, so this is I actually had a designer print out all the emails Etsy sends so we could post them on the wall for everybody to see. It turns out 2 designers worth of emails is how many we sent to customers. So all this transparency and trust allows designers and teams to move super, super fast, which is great because at Etsy we have a culture of like shipping really fast, breaking stuff, learning, and iterating away from it. Which kind of leads to like one of the last things, which is treat nothing as precious. Not even cool RVs in slow motion. So this is Andy. He is an engineer at Etsy. He was the first engineer I ever worked with at Etsy. And he and I got together to work on a redesign, a total overhaul of the item review system, which hadn't been touched since, whatever, 2006 or something. And it was really bad, and so we were going to completely overhaul it. And we had our first meeting, and we'd never met each other, so we're kind of feeling each other out, and we're like whiteboarding a little bit and talking. And we kind of came up with like a quick, dirty first pass at something, like a sketch. And we're walking out of the meeting, and he turned to me, and he's like, okay, I'm going to build that. You start designing it. Like, if either of us figures out we're wrong, no big deal, I'll throw away the code. Like, and I was kind of blown away, because I'm usually the one throwing away stuff. It's not usually engineering throwing away stuff. And that's how it worked. Like, we iterated and iterated and iterated, and at times, like, had to completely throw away all the work we had done, and he was so easy about it. He was like, yep, you're right, like, we should do the right thing, like, kill this, like, do it again. So we threw away a lot of code and a lot of design as we discovered like the flaws and the misconceptions about the product we were working on. And so we worked on this for a while, and we shipped it, and we realized, you know that thing where you ship something and you realize you forgot something? right, you hit the button, it's over, it's out in the world, you can't take it back, and like, we forgot something really important. So we had to pivot really hard, and we had a very short period of time to do it. We had to get it out in around 24 or 48 hours. And so we sat down in the kitchen, and he and I like talked and discussed like what we should do, like what the thing should be. In about 20 minutes, this is his writing, not mine. Mine's actually not much better than that. But we sat down and discussed, and he wrote all this down, and when we sat back at our desk, we sat right next to each other, and he like slaps this between us, and we built this. Like, this is the spec. Like, we built this thing to spec. We did not deter from this. This is exactly what went on the website. Yeah, so that was cool. And so we built it really fast. We were designing it really fast. That's our PM Kalia between us, like testing as fast as we can build it, making sure that it's all good. Also at Etsy, everybody does their own QA. They don't have a QA department. Everybody is responsible for their own. And I think if I'd been like hell-bent on being like the designer and like doing the design process like the way I wanted and like getting it right and being right, and if he'd been hell-bent on like, well, I need the design spec before I can start building it, we would have not been able to move very fast. Like, it would have been really slow and really painful, and we wouldn't have been able to make it. So there are two approaches to product development. There's this one that we kind of talked about earlier, which is a single timeline. You design, you plan, you design. Maybe design takes 6 weeks. You develop it, maybe it takes another like 6 weeks. You ship it, and you measure it. You realize you were wrong, and you failed. And then in the gray area, we're all fired. And this problem with this is you're waiting until the end to measure your success or your failure. And the problem really is that it assumes you're right. Like the long timelines, the singular, like the monolithic shipping like stuff, like assumes that we're right. And the spoiler is that we're wrong all the time. Like there's this whole area, like you've designed, and now like there's this whole gray area where you're not validating what you've done. Like you actually don't know if your idea is good or bad. So what we do at Etsy, and like what we were doing at BuzzFeed is like we're actually breaking these down into like short, iterative, measurable steps. Shorter cycles, evenly weighted, all towards the same goal, but smaller shipments so that we can really validate like the pieces of our like design and product as we go along and sanity check ourselves. And the nice thing about this is that it allows you to screw up, or the nicer way of saying it is probably learn about your ideas and make them better. So there's one particular project, so the listing page project at Etsy. We did this like maybe the first summer I was there. This is the old listing page at Etsy. It had never been touched, like it always, never been redesigned, always been added to. And you know, you can tell it's been added to, there's another add to cart button at the bottom. Like we added so much crap to that right rail, that's, instead of being like, there's too much crap here, we should redesign, they were like, let's add a button, another one. There's add to cart at the bottom. Because someone could scroll too far. It's terrible. It's the most highly trafficked page on Etsy. People get here from all over the place, right? From Google, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, Etsy itself. There's also like, this is the page, right? Like people like buy from this page. This is it. And so the other problem with this page is it doesn't represent what Etsy is or does. So at Etsy, everybody does support rotations once a quarter. And so every time I did my support rotation, I would inevitably get like an email that I was responding to that just said, all it would say is, can I get this in blue? I have no idea what that person was looking at. Like, zero clue. What had happened was they'd hit a page like this, and they would miss like there's like a little shop owner thing right here in the right hand, like about midway down. They'd miss it, obviously. And they'd go up and hit help, and then they'd navigate our insane like contact structure, like help structure to get to the contact form, where they would then write, can I get this in blue? Send. And while I like trying to find blue things for people, we should probably fix that. So this is the team that worked on it. So Kim was the designer, Frank was the PM, and Gio, who's not on Twitter, was the engineer. And this is it. This is the entire team. This is all 3 people that worked on it. I did not work on this, I should just say. I was outside that circle watching it, watching the magic happen. And what they said was, like, of course they want to increase conversion on this page. Like, that was a goal of this project. But it was also about communicating what Etsy is and trying to lower those like customer support tickets. So this was the first pass. It took about 4 to 6 weeks to do. It's already looking pretty good, like much better. Like the item description, we've kind of like tucked up a little bit and put on the right. And you can like expand it to see more. Because the item descriptions on Etsy, they made some decision way back in the day to like let them be as long as they could possibly be in the database. The only limit was just the database. So they're like, I think the limit was like 14,000 characters or something. So, and sellers use them all. So kind of tucked that up a little bit. We added more information in like, we started like this little box on the right-hand side that like had more information about the item, like what materials it was made out of, where it was from, how much shipping was, how long shipping would take. There's a subtle call out to the shop name, like right underneath the item title, and then a really big one at the bottom. So it's already starting to feel better. This whole thing took about 4 to 6 weeks because we had to refactor a bunch of code to get ourselves set up. And yeah, so then we ship it. Felt pretty good. And the result was total fucking disaster. It actually, like, bounce rates went way up, which if you're not familiar with bounces means that someone hit this page and was like, nope, and then left Etsy forever. Like, nope, no thank you. It performed way worse, like in all respects, than that old crappy page that had not been touched in years. It turns out descriptions are really important and people like to read them. And we also found out later that shipping info is also, people don't want that on this page. You're all insane, I really like it, but for some reason, like, people hate it. They don't want to look at it. They want it later. And I think like we'd spent 6 weeks on this. Like it'd be really easy to be kind of bummed out. Like we totally tanked. This thing like did not make it. But the secret was that like we knew it was going to fail. In fact, like we knew it so much that we had planned for it. And while we were getting data for that first like iteration, we were actually designing and building like the next iteration. And so then like it's like 2 weeks later, as soon as we got the data back, we shipped this. Which is the second version. There's a much bigger shop call at the top with more items from the shop. We removed that pesky shipping info, made the descriptions long, like put a contact shop module like dead center in the description where we think someone might actually have a question. 2 weeks later, we shipped this where we reversed it because YOLO. Added some tabs for shipping info just in case you might want it, but like because we still wanted it. And we kept going and going and going and shipping and shipping and shipping until we finally wound up with this, which was the final version. And we're going to do this long, sexy scroll. So this is the final version, like another shop module here with more items. Those descriptions get really long. And then this terrible footer that no longer exists. I'm so sorry. It's awful. I made this slide, and then I was like, oh, God. Like I did the scroll, and I was like, oh, we land right on this like terrible, terrible part of the website. And this whole project took about 6 months. And in 6 months, we shipped about, I think, 23 or 24 versions of that page. So we're moving really, really fast. And if we'd spent 6 months just like designing and building one single version, we would have been totally screwed. So we benefit a lot from this, like from this very short, iterative, measurable like product cycle. And these are just a few of the, like, I couldn't find them all. I was digging through Dropbox, but like these are just a few of the versions we shipped. And some of the like variations are so small you can't even see them. But it was just us testing like what the right thing to do was. Something else that's interesting here is like Etsy usually like I think people have a hard time like doing big redesigns like a lot of data-driven companies do, because like you're like, well, like how do you know? Like how do you know what went wrong? If you change too many things at once, like you're not going to know, right? And Frank, the PM on this, is one of those people, very data-driven. And his opinion was like, he actually said something like, you can't make big changes with small iteration. Like you can't like iterate your way to substantive like big change. And so what we wound up doing was we kept the original one as the control all the way through this process. So we shipped the very first new version knowing it was going to fail. That's our new baseline. Using the control as the thing we want to hit or pass, but using this as like the thing to build off of instead of the old control. So that's like the way, if you want to do a big redesign and you want to measure it and you want to iterate, like that's, and have an iterative process, like that's how to do it. Ship your redesign, keep the control, and then iterate on the redesign until it beats the control. Like that's good advice. I had never thought about that before. So, yeah, so we did all these versions, and we benefited a lot from like accepting our designs are imperfect. It lets ideas come from anywhere. Like once we're able to like humble ourselves and know that like our solution's not the solution, it lets us take ideas from other people, helps us try riskier things. We begin to desire learning instead of just winning. And the nice thing is, if the ideas are coming from your entire team, like when you do fail or you do succeed, like it's together. Like it's not just you. Like design didn't fail, the project or whatever. It's like no, the team together like has like not had success and is now moving on to like try to achieve it, right? And you know, like the truth is actually designers are necessary. I was lying earlier. Got you. I've been told a few times in my career that I get put onto hard projects and messy teams because I'm, quote, really good at unshitting that stuff. I think that's a compliment. But here's the thing, I'm not special. Like that's like, this isn't just me. Like I think actually all designers have the capacity to be really great at this. A great designer, I think, can walk onto any project with any team and help make it great. Because that's our job. Design is problem solving. It's like taking a world that looks like this and thinking about it like this. We have to stop just like designing the products we're working on, the graphics, the ads. We have to stop only empathizing with the readers or the users. And we have to start like treating our organizations and the people we work with like user experience problems. Like it's real life user experience. We have to like basically design all the things. Like, because, yeah, it's adorable. Because I'm actually allergic to cats. This is really hard for me to put in here. Because design's for everybody. That's it. Thanks.
So you've done all of this design at Etsy, and now you've moved over to BuzzFeed. You don't know anything about BuzzFeed yet, but what do you want to accomplish? Like, what do you think you're going to be focusing on?
Yeah, so the first few weeks have been mostly organizational stuff, figuring out like, hold on, parched. So the product team at BuzzFeed when I got there was about to go through like, I think you would call, like, they called it a reorg, but it's really like we organized. Because when I got there, like designers were being shotgunned onto different projects. They'd have like 5 completely different things they were working on. Engineers were the same. Like you may not even know who your engineers were going to be while you were designing it. It was just a huge pain. And it's like hard for people to focus. And so the first few weeks were actually just like working with Dow, our publisher, Chris Johansson, our VP of product, and a few other folks in engineering to like figure out like the right structure for the product team. And so we rolled that out a few weeks ago, and that's brand new, and it feels pretty good so far. We're like working out the kinks, feeling it out. But now like designers are able to focus on particular areas. The next thing I'm doing is hiring, because right now a lot of people report to me, and that can't happen. It doesn't scale for us to hire a bunch of designers, so I'm looking for design managers. Sorry, I'm not supposed to plug anything, I don't think, so never mind. We're not hiring at all, but actually that is a big focus for the next little while. I'm talking a bunch to editorial right now. Like I have one-on-ones with some of the like editors of like Life and stuff to like just talk and like see what's up. So I don't know. I mean, it's very vague still, to be honest with you. Like I'm just kind of like talking to a bunch of people and figuring out what the best use of my time would be and like where I can be most impactful. Yeah, I guess it's a really bad answer. Complete redesign, that's what we're doing. Yeah, I'll repeat it if you, yeah.
There were some really, really inspirational nuggets in there on collaborative design within teams. What advice can you give us when we come across design by committee roadblocks?
Yeah, design by committee, that's the best. The best kind of design. I don't know, I mean, like, whenever I was doing client work, if there was a committee, I would not work with. I would demand that at least one person from that committee was the person. Like there needs to be a person, right? There can't be 5. There needs to be 1. Even if there's a committee back here that that person goes and talks to, like I can't like it just can't be that way, right? You need like the decider for that group, and then you need to like it's the same thing, right? It's like how do you like pull people in and like into the process so they are not like so you're not presenting to them. Like, again, like whenever I present stuff to people, like if they haven't seen it before, it's a surprise. It's always a surprise, right? Like at Amazon, when we showed Jeff stuff, we saw him every 3 weeks or so, but he wasn't a part of the 3 weeks of the process of the stuff we were working on. Like he had no idea what we were about to show him. And so every time he was like shocked, right? It's like, whoa, what is this? And you're like, well, you know, you weren't there for the whole thing. And it makes it really hard. And so my advice would be try to like, as much as you can, like be like, how can we share this with you all the time, like basically like all the way through, like don't wait, and if you know, if it's just designed by committee forever, then like, I don't know, maybe you're at the wrong place. That's real, like there are places that I get asked that a lot. Like someone asked me at the last conference I was at, like what happens if like there are literally walls and people really don't like each other across the organization? I'm like, whoa, you might want to leave, like it's terrible. Like, I don't know, you should never be afraid to like try to look for something that like, a company that values the same things you do, or thinks about things the way you do. Like Simon Sinek has that book, Start With Why, I think. And that's really important when you're looking for a job or when you're like working at a place. I feel like people in like news actually like, even just talking to people here, like there's a strong sense of why in news organizations, which is awesome. A lot of companies don't have that sort of thing, so that's great.
So you were showing a lot of variation in those pages, and I think in news organizations, sometimes you worry about changing things too much or people getting lost, or how do you work with so many iterations? I mean, at BuzzFeed, how are you planning to reorganize these pages without making people hate you?
Well, you can never avoid that. People hate you no matter what. I mean, so at Etsy, what was actually really helpful eventually was not with that project, but did a lot of user testing. So the nice thing about Etsy and also about BuzzFeed is there's a lot of traffic. So you actually don't have to roll these things out very far. So like I think that page we rolled out to 1%. Like each iteration was just 1% of traffic, and it would give us statistical significance in about 2 weeks, which also was enough padding for us to like do the next round, right? So like as you start to test this stuff and roll it out, like roll it out just a little to like make sure that like you're not randomizing too much of the population. Nobody even noticed. I mean, that's the thing, like nobody even noticed we were running that experiment, which was kind of crazy for Etsy because like our seller communities were extremely passionate and would totally notice if we'd rolled it out any further than that. I don't know, I don't really worry about that stuff very much. Like you want to be as like careful and conscientious as you can. So if you have user testing available to you, do that. At Etsy, we built like a user testing team, or a user research team, sorry, that like we could, again, with this like CSS framework, we would build the feature in about an hour and a half, and then be able to throw it onto a device or onto like a desktop website and like have somebody actually use it, even if it was like super fake. And we would just like have people come in and we'd watch them use it, and then we'd iterate away from that and like iterate from that and iterate away from that as we built the like backbone with engineering, because the engineering, like back end of engineering for this stuff like takes a long time. So you should be validating as much as you can in the meantime without being able to get actual data, right? So if you have that, that's great. I don't know, you just want to be as sure as possible. And if you're looking at the numbers from your rollout and it's looking good, like then, I don't know, like make it seem awesome, like announce it, like make it seem like it's a really great thing, like work with your PR team. At Etsy, actually, all the teams had product marketing managers on them. So like when the feature was ready, they would figure out the best way to like roll it out, right? Like to like talk about it, and then to like maybe it's just a blog post, or maybe it's like we're gonna build a single serving site to talk about it or whatever, and like, but there was somebody like dedicated to the team that would like help you figure that out. So for this actually, when we rolled it out, we did a preview for sellers, because the Etsy seller community is again very, very vocal, and they care a lot because it's their livelihood and they should care. So we did a preview like maybe like 10 days or something like that, where we like set up the single serving site, let you read through it, and then you could click and be like, show me my listings in this new format. So they could look at it, they could maybe make some adjustments to their photos or like to their like descriptions before we rolled it out, right? Because like at that point we had tested it and we were sure. So we were like, we're gonna do this no matter what, but here's this like time for you to like get used to it, and then we will move it on. Betas are good.
Sorry, I think
we're out of time.
So thank you so much, Kat.